BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. This episode of Black Box Online Radio is brought to you by Rep Sports and Raze Energy. Are you a fan of energy drinks, protein shakes, and health foods? Well, I sure am. I use the stuff almost every single day. They sell Raze Energy products at my local gym, but you can have them shipped to your home. Use the coupon code NED075, that's NED075, for discounts applied at the checkout. The link is in the description box.
Okay, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. Just a couple of quick announcements before we begin. The first is that the 7th episode of the podcast Serial Killer Z to A is now available online. You can get that anywhere you get your podcasts. Season 1 is entirely devoted to the Zodiac Killer, and it is indeed a Zodiac Killer channel original production. But the future seasons will be covering other serial killer stories. The episodes that are out now are covering a lot of the pre-Zodiac crimes that took place in the 1960s and some additional post-canonical crimes that took place in the 1970s, such as the attempted abduction of Kathleen Johns, as well as the disappearance of Donna Lass from 1970. Both of those incidents took place in that year. So I would invite you to listen to that one. You can get it anywhere on the podcast circuit, including iHeartRadio. And as for this show, Black Box Online Radio, that brings us to our second announcement, and that is that this program now has a page on BuyMeACoffee.com. If you would like to support the show, you can go over to that page. There's a link in the description box and make a contribution. And I do have to emphasize one thing. The reason why I chose to make that page was because, not for the money, but just dealing with the YouTube censorship, which became increasingly frustrating. And I was talking about this on the Instagram journal, about how this channel is now monetized, and almost every other video gets demonetized because it's in the true crime world. Anything that's dealing with serial killers or true crime cases that are even having the smallest amount of blood and gore, they usually get demonetized. But that even wasn't the straw that broke the camel's back. What really did it for me was I did an episode recently on the disappearance of Tara Calico from 1988, and I posted a photo of Tara Calico and a piece of evidence from the case called the Polaroid, which it is indeed a Polaroid photo, and they flagged it, and they said that this violated their policy on nudity and sexuality. They were calling this a pornographic image, and I was just absolutely stunned. Everybody in the photos is completely clothed, absolutely no nudity or pornography of any kind, and I was like, that's it. That's just the last straw. I have had it with these messages. Just someone telling you that your content is unworthy, so to speak, like that. And over the past 2 years, a lot of people have said that they were willing to contribute financially to this program, and I was just saying, no, I'm not really looking to do that. But I guess it's finally at the time when if you would like to make a donation, you can do that at BuyMeACoffee.com. And there's another point, though, that I need to share with you, and that is that absolutely any contribution that you make will be put back into Black Box Online Radio. And I would hear other YouTubers and sometimes even radio hosts talking about that. And I was thinking, yeah, right, they're just saying that. Oh, no, it's true. I mean, we're talking about things like buying true crime books to discuss on the program, or equipment for some newer, more expensive um, features on this channel. Absolutely every ounce of financial contributions will be put into the channel. So buymeacoffee.com, and the name is BlackBoxNid88, which is the same name as my Instagram page, but you can just go into the description box and click on the link there. And also, there are other ways you can support the show. You can get the book Killer on a White Horse. You can buy products from Raze Energy. Use the coupon code at 075, the Teespring page, t-shirts, coffee mugs, all of that stuff. But Buy Me a Coffee is the new page that is available. And thank you so much to everyone who has already contributed. Now, I've been beginning these Zodiac Mondays with a challenge question normally, and I would like to ask you guys this week's icebreaker question. Do mean people have high self-esteem? What do you think? And you can weigh in the comments section down below. Any response is welcome. Do mean people have high self-esteem? And I started thinking about this one because I got back into watching the lectures from Jordan Peterson online, and some of the older ones, actually. I'm not the biggest fan of the newer stuff that he has released in 2022, the book Beyond Order and so on, but just watching him from the older days when he was a professor at the University of Toronto, and he was exploring the subject in one of his lectures, and he said something that I've been saying for years, and that is that self-esteem doesn't exist. And I began thinking about this one years and years ago, because I was reading a discussion on a forum that was talking about narcissism, but you could very easily relate it to mean people. And there are these two people going back and forth, and they're saying something to the effect of, mean people have very high self-esteem, they have a very high self-image, they think very highly of themselves, even to the point where it can almost become a mental disorder. And then someone is responding to that by saying, no, mean people have very low self-esteem, and they use these types of mean behaviors as a way to mask their fears of rejection and humiliation. And that, partnered with some other experiences, just led me to believe that this whole stuff about self-esteem, it doesn't sound like it's anything other than interpretation. Person A is interpreting it this way, person B is interpreting it that way. Like, you hear one thing from the Facebook philosopher and one thing from the YouTube psychologist, and it's just a person's take on the subject. Therefore, there isn't actually anything to evaluate. And Jordan Peterson, who is a professional psychologist, said something almost exactly identical to that. But the real reason that he said it, an additional layer to what I just shared, is that he thought there weren't enough factors that people were using in determining high self-esteem and low self-esteem. Now, to relate that to the true crime world, there is also something called the HARE checklist. HARE, HARE checklist, and that deals with psychopathy and sociopathy. Psychopath meaning the person is born with it, sociopath meaning the social environment or social surroundings have altered this person's behavior and neurological functioning. And he said even that, though, the HARE checklist has only 20 items on it, that isn't enough to determine if someone is actually a psychopath or a sociopath, or is going to be so limited that that evaluation is impractical. And I haven't really challenged that one before, but yes, the HARE checklist has 20 items. You get a score of 0, 1, or 2 for each item, and if the person has 30 or more points than out of 40, then they are deemed to be a psychopath or a sociopath. But to be very honest with you guys, if you get away from the medical world for a second, I did an episode once on Black Box Online Radio talking about how I think the term psychopath or the term sociopath is horribly misused by people. In fact, I think they're just conflating it with mean behavior, or being a jerk, or being rude, or just not caring about other people. But just because someone is showing blatant disregard for somebody else, it doesn't mean that they are a psychopath. As I said, you'd have to have a score of 30 or higher out of 40 on the hair checklist, and even you have this other psychologist, like I said, Dr. Jordan Peterson, saying that's an ineffective way to determine. But dealing with the more conventional definition of mean people, whatever it means to you actually, like whatever definition you would like to use, do mean people have high self-esteem? And I think I've given my 2 cents. I don't think self-esteem exists, so I would say no. But, well, what is your response to the challenge question? You can put your ideas in the comment section down below. I would love to read them. Now, to talk about the first piece of Zodiac Killer news in this episode, I have to give a shout out to Dirt Poor Richard, who has made several videos about the Zodiac Killer on his YouTube channel. One more time, Dirt Poor Richard. And he really tries to solve the Zodiac ciphers. The Zodiac Killer was a serial killer that operated in California in the 1960s, beginning on December 20th of 1968, and concluding his activities on October 11th of 1969. It's also possible the Zodiac committed crimes before that and after that. And Dirt Poor Richard has attempted to solve the Z340 and finding a new message in the Z408, and even back to 1966 with the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, a pre-Zodiac crime. He proposed a possible solution to the misspellings in the Riverside Confession that was written after her death. So I would like to look at his comments that he made about the 408 cipher and the Zodiac symbol. His comments were made in that video, and you can hear it on his channel. Because last week I was talking about how the final line of the 408 cipher has a series of letters in it that are, well, still uncoded to this day. And also, Dirt Poor Richard found something very interesting about the Zodiac Killer symbol, and that is that if you were to draw the lines in a certain way, you can make a Z inside of the Zodiac symbol. And what really is the origin of this? Because there are 4 points on the Zodiac Killer symbol. Some people think that it's a compass, some people think that it is a religious cross, or maybe even a satanic cross. But could it possibly mean that this person has 4 letters in their name? Because it's like he puts 1 letter on each point of the compass, or each point of the Zodiac symbol, and then draws the Z. So it's almost like this person is the Zodiac Killer inside. And you might be thinking already about some Zodiac suspects, perhaps Ross Sullivan, who had 4 letters in his first name. And as I understand, Dirt Poor Richard has really looked at Ross Sullivan in the past as a Zodiac Killer suspect, but he did not endorse him. And when I was watching this video on the 408 cipher, he said something to the effect of, a possible theory is that Ross Sullivan was a mentally unstable and deranged person who wrote letters taking credit for murders that he didn't commit. What do you think about that? Is a theory meaning that Ross Sullivan didn't commit the Lake Herman Road murders, didn't commit the Blue Rock Springs shooting, didn't commit the Lake Berryessa stabbing, and he didn't commit the Stein murder. Now, I mean, how would he have had access to Paul Stein's bloody shirt, which was mailed in? I don't know. How would he have been able to state the facts that only the Zodiac and the police knew in the July 31st and August 4th letters of 69? I don't know. But what do you think about that exact theory? And more importantly, what do you think about this theory that you're supposed to draw the letter Z inside the Zodiac symbol, and it is going to give you the 4 letters on the outside? But I do have to point out that Ross Sullivan isn't the only person who has 4 letters in his name as a suspect. If you use the last name, you have Lawrence Kane, Kane. Lawrence Kane's legal name was Lawrence K, Kaye. Kane was an alias. And there are also some other interpretations of the Zodiac Killer symbol. Michael Cole, author of the Zodiac Revisited trilogy, said that it was perhaps heavily inspired by the nautical compass rose. He believed that the Zodiac was either ex-Navy or ex-Air Force, and he was very familiar with a book called The American Practical Navigator, and all of these things influenced the Zodiac Killer's decisions. Drew Beeson, also author of Sighting In on the Zodiac Killer, says that the Zodiac symbol simply came from the Zodiac wristwatches, and there's a brand of wristwatch that has that name, and Drew Beeson's suspect, Donald Lee Cheney, had a father who was a watchmaker, sadly named Ned. But there are even some other possibilities out there. Randy Kenny, for example, who brought Louis Myers forward as a Zodiac Killer suspect, said that he thought it was a Celtic cross, and Louis Myers was very passionate about his Celtic, more precisely Scottish heritage. There's the channel Zodiac Killer Identified, which talks about Don Hardin as a Zodiac suspect, saying Don Hardin was the president of his Unitarian church. They have a circle with a cross going through it on top of the church. That's their cross that the church uses. And even Geraldo Rivera talked about this in the early 90s, speculating that maybe the circle with a cross comes from Aleister Crowley and it's meant to be satanic. So what do you think about that? And I really want to know what you guys have to say about the 4 letters in the name, and you draw the Z inside the circle. And as I understand it, Dirt Poor Richard was leaning toward Ross Sullivan as a Zodiac Killer suspect, but he was not completely sold on him. And when I was watching the video about the 408 cipher, he was posting in the comments section down below and responding to somebody's challenge that Ross Sullivan was too big to be the Zodiac Killer. And what Poor Richard said was that Ross Sullivan didn't have his weight gain until he was in his older years, and Ross Sullivan passed away in 1977, as I understand, from complications resulting from morbid obesity, and someone responded by saying that he was still 300 pounds in 1968 and 69, and of course the Zodiac Killer was not reported to have been that large. But Drew Beeson responded in a Facebook group, actually, by posting something from the Santa Cruz Sentinel that talks about Ross Sullivan's arrest in February of 1968, and the news clipping says, "Bizarre behavior leads to arrest. Santa Cruz police took a 26-year-old Riverside man into custody yesterday afternoon after he cavorted in the nude in a dazed trance in the 900 block of 3rd Street. Police said they responded to a call from a man who said he was pinned inside a telephone booth by a naked man who was 6 feet, 2 inches tall, and weighed 300 pounds. I repeat, 300 pounds in 1968. Officers said they found the man and had to use force to arrest him. He was booked on charges of indecent exposure and disorderly conduct and was taken to the General Hospital on a 72-hour mental hold." And I did say this once on the channel before, but somebody once wrote in saying, "Poor Ross Sullivan, it sounded like he had a tragic life," and I absolutely agree with that, because there are a lot of people out there who think that Ross Sullivan was the Zodiac Killer, but it's important to remember that all of these suspects that we're talking about have never been convicted of those murders. And Ross was someone who really dealt with mental health issues, whether it was being at Patton State Mental Hospital, or as you just heard there in 1968 when he was taken into police custody and then sent into the General Hospital for the mental evaluation. But it does indeed appear that he weighed 300 pounds in 1968. That debate comes up all the time. You'll see it in the comment section here on Black Box Online Radio as well. Some people say that Ross Sullivan was too big to be the Zodiac Killer, 6'2", 300 pounds, when you have police reports that say 5'8", 200 pounds, 5'10", 200 pounds, and even at Lake Berryessa, the estimate of 6 feet tall. But I certainly have never encountered anyone saying that the Zodiac Killer was 6'2". But a lot of people say that, well, he didn't gain his weight until after 1971. I mean, it seems like he did weigh 300 pounds in 1968. And right now I would like to give some individual shout-outs to the people who have supported this show on BuyMeACoffee.com, as anybody can do. Find the link in the description box. First one is to Floyd Black 53. We have one to Tyler Grover and one to Stefan Nyborg. And their messages are as follows. Ned, you work so hard, it's about time you get something back. Thank you. Tyler Grover says, thanks for the content, Ned. Great guy, great channel. Much appreciated there. And I love your podcast, Ned. I really hope your YouTube channel will grow and that you'll be able to continue your show. BBOR is undoubtedly one of the best true crime podcasts out there. Hey, all of you BuyMeACoffee.com supporters, you guys are awesome. And in the next segment here, we have something about the Zodiac Killer organized crime angle, which for simplicity's sake I'm going to be referring to as the Zodiac Mafia connection. And this comes to us from Jonas from Finland, although I'm sorry if I don't pronounce Finnish names too well. It might be Jonas. And it says, Hi Ned, you produce the best Zodiac content online. Thanks for the entertainment and information. Have you ever looked at a possible Zodiac Mafia angle? In the His Name Was Arthur Lee Allen documentary, former criminal Ralph Spinelli claims that Allen approached him in his Fairfield, California nightclub and offered himself as a contract killer to Spinelli's friends, i.e. the mob. Don Chaney states in the same documentary that Allen talked about becoming a professional contract killer. If these stories are true, it seems that the true motivation behind the Zodiac murders was to create a hitman resume and then use it to sell services to the mob. Since Allen wasn't ethnically Italian, he couldn't become a made member of the organization, but the Cosa Nostra could employ non-Italians as associates. In 1969, the San Francisco mob was headed by Jimmy the Hat Lanza. The mob was also a presence in Vallejo, as can be read from an article that was posted in the Times Herald in 2018. The San Francisco mob was doing hits in the 1970s. For example, gangster Joseph Barboza was brutally murdered in San Francisco in February of 1976 by unknown assailants. Arthur Lee Allen was locked up at Atascadero until 1977. However, it would be interesting to research if there were any unsolved gangland murders in Northern California, and it actually says gangland-style murders, to be clear, during the 1970s or 80s, which might be similar to the Zodiac murders. Maybe you could discuss this fantastic topic on your BBOR podcast. Best regards, Jonas from Finland. And I do think it's an excellent request, and perhaps in the future I will do something much larger and more in-depth, because this angle of the organized crime connection, the Zodiac Mafia connection, is one that I have definitely heard before. I'm sure you've even heard that story about Arthur Lee Allen wanted to become the enforcer for an organized crime syndicate. He wanted to become a criminal enforcer, for lack of a better term, and he said, those Zodiac murders, that was me. I'm the one who did that. And that's what this was all about, proving that he could commit these crimes and not get caught, and also proving that he was smarter than the police, proving that he had it in him. And as you heard very clearly in that message that was sent into BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com, it was all about building a criminal resume. And there are several different angles on the Zodiac Mafia connection, and one of them is heavily tied to the drug trade. Now, this one doesn't have to involve Arthur Lee Allen, but I was just looking at an old comment that somebody left on an episode about, it must be 3 years ago now, goodness gracious, and they said that they thought it was really odd that a murder took place on a drug corridor, meaning Lake Herman Road, as well as the murder of a taxi driver in San Francisco, that's Paul Stein, and that is all about the organized crime syndicates as well, specifically the drug dealing, and it really depends on what type of gang you're talking about, whether it's just the Hells Angels and their connections to the drug trade, or maybe there's even a larger operation going on. And some people think that David Faraday was murdered at Lake Herman Road on December 20th of 68 because he interfered with the drug trade. And somebody responded to me by making a comment like that, and they said, is it really fair to say that David Faraday interfered with the drug trade if all he did was threaten to rat somebody out for selling weed? I mean, we're talking about pushing some grass at a high school. How on earth could you call that the drug trade? And my answer to that question is, normally, yes. Yes, normally you'd be completely correct. I wouldn't call a teenager pushing grass at a high school part of the drug trade, except for the fact that the drugs come from this intermediary gang that works with the Hells Angels. And they have a bigger supplier that they have to report to. And if somebody thinks that there is going to be some trouble going on, that this person has caused me a very serious problem, or they created a serious problem for me, yeah, I could see how that would have some consequences in the drug trade, and that's why David Faraday was murdered along with Betty Lou Jensen. The other theory is that they were just there at the wrong place at the wrong time, and you can hear all kinds of stories about how they're caught up in the drug trade, and that David Faraday rats the guy out for selling some grass at his school, right? Or the guy's he threatened to rat the guy out. Maybe he actually did. And then he took Betty Lou to Lake Herman Road because he knew that there was going to be a drug bust going on nearby. And then somebody found his car. They had followed him. They knew what was happening and they murdered him. All kinds of wild stories. I don't know if those are true or not. But the second Zodiac crime is the Blue Rock Springs shooting that occurred on July 4th of 1969. And that's all the murder of Darlene Ferrin and the shooting of Mike Michaud. What were they doing at Blue Rock Springs Park? Well, the most commonly known narrative is they went there to buy drugs. Again, that has another connection to the drugs, which, as we said, have a connection to organized crime. And with the Stein murder, a lot of people think Paul Stein was murdered because, as a taxi driver, at some point, he gave a ride to somebody and he witnessed something that he shouldn't have seen, or maybe it was just a way of covering up the previous crimes, doing something that was confusing the police. All right, I can understand it. But what I don't understand in this whole drug connection theory is why murder Cecilia Shepard at Lake Berryessa? Why stab Brian Hartnell at Lake Berryessa? Because after the Blue Rock Springs shooting, that's the second crime, there is the Lake Berryessa stabbing, which happened 2 weeks before the Stein murder. But at the Lake Berryessa stabbing, the Zodiac killer is wearing the hooded costume, he is carrying the knife and the pre-cut lengths of rope, and he ties up Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, and they're both stabbed in the back, and then he turns Cecilia over on her stomach and stabs her again. Okay, how on earth does that fit into this whole covering up murders connected to the drug trade angle? I don't believe that that one does. And a third variant of this Zodiac Mafia connection does not involve Arthur Lee Allen again either. It involves Lawrence Kane, and Lawrence Kane worked for the mobster Alan Dorfman, and I had the opportunity to discuss this with Travis Miller, who runs the Lawrence Kane WordPress and has been researching the life of Lawrence Kane for about 10 years, and he is very clear that he does not think that Lawrence Kane was the Zodiac killer. And what I said was, what really is this whole thing about our Lawrence Kane as some type of hitman for the organized crime syndicates? And the response I got was, he definitely worked for the mobster Alan Dorfman, he was on the payroll, and he also moves to the Lake Tahoe region, and it's quite possible that he was the prime suspect in the murder of Dana Lull. By prime suspect, I mean in the court of public opinion, that he was the murderer of Dana Lull in 1974. I mean, he was never convicted of that, but it's possible. So he seems like some guy who has homicidal tendencies, and again is connected to organized crime. But I almost think that Lawrence Kane's connections are a little bit too sociable, because, as you heard in that email that was written out, they're talking about Arthur Lee Allen is trying to get into the criminal world. A theory, mind you, but he's not already there. He's trying to build a criminal, mafioso, mobster, enforcer resume. That was the word that was used, resume. And I don't believe that the Zodiac would have had perhaps some type of working connection for organized crime, or that these were all hits that were done on people who had some type of connection to the drug trade in California. I mean, how on earth would Cecilia Shepard be factored into that? So out of these three theories that have been put forward, I definitely think the one involving Arthur Lee Allen is the most plausible, that this isn't some guy who's doing it because other people have asked him to. It was simply done because he did it on his own accord, and you have somebody who is organized all that. But, I mean, I've been very clear. I don't believe that Arthur Lee Allen was the Zodiac Killer. I even put him in my debunking series, and a lot of people go back and forth about this. And I'll just ask you this question. Was Arthur Lee Allen the Zodiac Killer? And the reason why they go back and forth is some people say all of those years, people were looking at Arthur Lee Allen and they couldn't find it. They couldn't find the pieces of evidence that would convict him. And then, on the other hand, people say Allen just got lucky. They were zeroing in on him. They thought it was him. They came close to arresting him and putting him on trial for it, but they simply couldn't convict him, so it didn't happen. He was just very fortunate, but he was indeed the Zodiac Killer, and some people who stand by that would be the Seawaters, particularly Dave and Connie Seawater, who say that they had a deathbed confession from Arthur Lee Allen, and by deathbed confession they just mean in the month prior to his death he made a confession to them that he was the Zodiac. But what do you think? Do you think Arthur Lee Allen was the Zodiac? And which theory do you side with, that, hey, they were looking at this guy very closely, they didn't find it, or he slipped through the cracks, the evidence was destroyed, and he got away with it? Which one do you think is right? But excellent request there. And our next one is also sent into the email address, BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. And this one comes to us from Stuart McAdam, who says, "Hey Ned, I'm a long-time listener of your show after Drew Beeson gave you a powerful recommendation. Hey Drew, thanks a lot. One thing I would love for you to discuss on the show at some point is the Lake Berryessa sighting by Dr. Rayfield and his son, and what this could mean for the case. Richard Grinnell has done an interesting analysis over it on ZodiacCiphers.com and feels like it doesn't get enough attention. The biggest thing that makes me suspect that Dr. Rayfield and his son did indeed see the Zodiac Killer is the physical description in the t-shirt. A description of a 5'10" male, heavy build, dark t-shirt with red in it. And an interesting observation Dr. Rayfield made was the subject was walking, not apparently carrying anything fit for being in the area they were in. No camping gear, no knife, no gun, or anything. My thoughts are that this was indeed the Zodiac Killer on the way back to his car after the attack on Brian and Cecilia. I don't think he would have risked the car being seen by anyone when he wrote on the Carmen Gia with the felt-tip pen. Even on a remote road like that, there were other people in the area, and if anyone heard the attack, it would have been a lot harder for them to hide. It would be great to get your thoughts on this." And this again refers to the Lake Berryessa stabbing, September 27th, 1969, the only time the Zodiac Killer wore the hooded costume, mind you. So, and if Stuart, if you do hear this, let me know if I understand your take on the subject correctly. It seems as if the Zodiac commits the stabbing, then walks backward toward Brian Hartnell's Carmen Gia, writes the message on the car door, then removes the hood and the pre-cut lengths of rope, and, well, those would have been back at the crime scene, mind you, but he removes the hood, and he has the bloody knife and the gun, and he hides them somewhere, and then he's walking back in the plain t-shirt, and that's when he is witnessed. Then that guy gets into his car and drives to the location where he has stashed all the killing equipment, for lack of a better term, and then picks it up and leaves. If so, that seems like it could be spot on. Someone has just removed the hood, hid the knife, hid the gun, and the Zodiac would have also been wearing a light or dark-colored windbreaker. I think dark, actually. It was more described as perhaps navy blue underneath the Lake Berryessa costume, so he could have even removed that as well. And I personally thought in the past that the windbreaker material would have been very easy to crumple up, and he could have even fit that into his pocket. And I mean, I absolutely agree with the statement that the person is trying to alter his appearance so he messes with witness descriptions, because if somebody is wearing a windbreaker, how easy would it be to take that off, crumple it up into his pocket, or stash it behind the tree somewhere? And then if anybody saw the person again, no, he's wearing a dark-colored t-shirt, and so if someone saw him without the hood on. Oh, he was wearing a dark-colored windbreaker. It's going to mess with the witness descriptions. But I also want to talk about the other sighting at Lake Berryessa that happened earlier in the day with someone who is known as the Lake Berryessa voyeur. He is a guy who was seen looking at 3 different girls, and they were, I said different girls, but they were actually in a group, 3 girls, and they repeated that this man is just staring at them for a very long time. He was very neatly dressed, and his hair almost looked like it was a wig because it was so neat, and they thought it was really odd that he didn't have his shirt tucked in based on how neat he was. And some people think that this was the Zodiac killer who was trying to stalk some victims, look for new victims. I absolutely disagree with that. I think that this is just some guy who's a little bit pervy, or even if pervy isn't the right word, he's just looking at 3 girls sunbathing. He's just, maybe hormonal is a better word than pervy. I think that's what it is, because the Zodiac killer up until that point only targeted couples when a man and a woman were present. And I don't believe that this guy was going to murder the 3 girls at Lake Berryessa. I simply think that he was just checking them out. But giving a shout out to Playtime, who proposed something rather interesting about not only the Lake Berryessa voyeur, but also the entire Lake Berryessa stabbing, and that relates to the Zodiac Manson connection. And Playtime asked me, more or less, what do you think about Tex Watson as a suspect in the Lake Berryessa stabbing? Tex Watson is, of course, the person who was convicted for participating in practically all of the Tate LaBianca murders. And there was even one interview that he did once when they introduced him as the person who actually committed all of them, and viewing all the other women in the Manson family as participants, and Tex Watson is the man who murdered Sharon Tate and Leno and Rosemary LaBianca and everybody else. But to be very clear, yes, there were other participants of the Manson family who did some very vicious things to the people who were murdered in August of 1969. But the Lake Berryessa stabbing happened in September 27th of 1969, and as I understand from discussing this with Howard Davis on the Zodiac Killer channel, he seems to think that a variant of the Zodiac Manson connection could be that Bruce Davis, Charles Manson's right-hand man, committed at least one of the murders, and the other members of the Manson family were responsible for the other crimes that were attributed to the Zodiac killer. And what do you make of Tex Watson as a suspect in the Lake Berryessa stabbing? And the exact reason for this is, as we just said about the Lake Berryessa voyeur, his hair was so neat that it appeared like it was a wig, and a big theory that has been put forward with the Lake Berryessa stabber who attacked Brian and Cecilia is that he was wearing a wig under the hooded costume. And Robert Graysmith talked a lot about this in his Zodiac books, and that he's, again, it's just a way of disguising somebody's physical appearance. And Tex Watson had his first job in California at a wig store, and he was somebody who even tried to open his own wig shop with a friend for a while, and the business didn't do too well. But you can read more about that in his book, Will You Die For Me?, the autobiography of Tex Watson. And you can always hear my response to it here on this channel. I did a book discussion on that one last year, and that was one of the Anything Goes Friday segments, which was a request. Any future requested topics are welcome in the comments section down below. But overall, what do I think about Tex Watson as the Lake Berryessa stabber or the Lake Berryessa voyeur? The immediate response is that Tex Watson has very noticeable eyes that I think almost everybody would pay attention to if they thought this man was stalking them for an extended period of time. But that's the voyeur. As far as being the Lake Berryessa stabber, I have to say everything that I said last week about Bruce Davis as the Zodiac killer. Where is this in the other Manson material? Like all the books, the interviews, the autobiographies. Where is the discussion on the Zodiac killer? And you would think 50 years, not once has anybody made a slip up or something. Oh yeah, well, Charlie was always saying that he was going to wreak havoc on the San Francisco Bay Area. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Not a single slip-up, not any type of illusion. And I was going through the old interviews. I always say that old, they're only about 4 years old. I was going through the recent interviews with Squeaky Fromy last week, and, she's just talking all about Manson, and all about Southern California, and all about the way that the family lived on the Spawn Ranch. Not a single ounce or hint, insinuation, or even possibility that is connected to the Zodiac killer or any type of crime spree that took place in San Francisco. And Tex Watson would be under a different set of circumstances because, he's already in jail, and, I guess it's the same deal with Bruce Davis. So I was about to say that Tex could have confessed to this if he wants to, get some more attention to himself, but even Tex Watson is still up for parole, and he is trying to get out. And when I was listening to the Tate LaBianca radio program last year, they said all of the Manson family was under the impression that they were going to be released at some point. Even Tex Watson, who, as I said, was a very, very major participant in 7 different murders, perhaps others, but no, I don't believe that he was the Lake Berryessa stabber, and to be honest, I don't think that the Manson connection is very strong. In fact, when I did the episode called Zodiac Killer Suspect Ratings, and I would rate the likelihood of the suspect having any involvement in the Zodiac Killer mystery, I gave the Manson connection a 0.5. But I do appreciate the question all the same. And the final note on Charles Manson is something that I was watching in an interview he did in 1989. It's actually called the Penny Daniels interview. And she was asking him about what he would do if he got out of prison. And then, of course, he said, well, I would get my guitar and I'd go back out to the desert. And you could see that he didn't have a pre-planned response and he was actually thinking about it. And then what he said was that there were some water holes in the desert, and before he had been arrested, he had planted a fig tree at each one of the water holes, but he didn't know that a fig tree needs both a male and female plant to produce the fruit. They need 2 different fig trees side by side to participate in the process. So he said he would get his guitar, go back to the desert, and then plant another row of fig trees by the water holes so that the figs could grow. And I was heavily reminded of the documentary that is on Peacock to all the people who have that streaming service about the Toolbox Killers and Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris. And in that one, they're doing an interview, and one of them says that when he was younger, he used to cry when he was watching soap operas, and the interviewer saw right through his BS. And she started laughing, and then he started laughing. And, talking about someone who is a serial killer, a murderer, convicted murderer, mind you, the interview was being conducted in prison. And they're just having a laugh about it because the whole point is serial killers have heightened predatory instincts. Think about what I said at the beginning. That quote from Jordan Peterson, they are predators and parasites at the same time. But with the predatory instincts, it's about putting people in a false sense of security. And when I did the episode on the serial killer John Aykroyd about the ghosts of Highway 20, he would be very good at that. Like the woman who survived his encounter just said he wasn't threatening in any single way. You will encounter this all the time. And I was thinking about Charles Manson in relation to that. Just saying something very gentle. It's talking about being in jail for, it would have been 20 years at the time, 1989. More or less, maybe, give or take, right? But what would you do if you got out of prison? I would go back to the desert and I would plant some fig trees. It's possible that they are trying to, by they I mean serial killers, are just trying to put people in a false sense of security, or they know how to manipulate people's emotions. And I often go back to the episode that I did on this channel called The Neuroscience of Serial Killers, when I had the opportunity to discuss this with a neuroscientist and have a conversation with her. And she said that after Charles Manson passed away, it was determined that he was almost certainly a born psychopath. His neurotransmitters were practically functioning backwards. But what do you think about that? Like, do you think that serial killers like to put people in a false sense of security, or do you think that it's all just a misunderstanding and maybe some of them are more truthful and maybe Charles Manson did want to plant the fig trees? No matter what, I think that that is just trying to create a gentle, harmless persona. And even if he's telling the truth about he would like to get his guitar and go back to the desert, I definitely think there's a manipulative component involved. But what do you think? You can weigh in the comments section down below. And for this channel, I do a regular segment every Friday called the Anything Goes Friday, where any subject is fair game. And lately I've been talking about the Jack the Ripper letters that were written and mailed in 1888. Jack the Ripper is the previous attempt of someone to create a serial killer like the Zodiac persona, and I do mean that. I've said this many times on the channel, that I believe the answers to the Zodiac killer mystery will be found in the Jack the Ripper case. But Jack the Ripper was a serial killer that operated in 1888, going on more or less a crime rampage from August 31st of that year to November 9th, an even shorter amount of time than the Zodiac killer's killing spree that took place over the course of 2 years, 68 to 69. But when I say over 2 years, I mean it passed New Year's Day. All of the Zodiac crimes took place within a 12-month cycle. And 2 weeks ago on the channel, I wanted to do an episode on the From Hell letter, one of the most famous letters that was allegedly sent in by Jack the Ripper, because that is the one that accompanied half of a kidney, which was reported to have come from one of the victims named Catherine Eddowes, and I simply wanted to know more, and you can hear all my observations in that episode, Jack the Ripper, the From Hell letter full analysis, and then I was just going to leave it at that. That was just going to be a one-off episode, but I think a lot of the time in the true crime world, one thing leads to another, and you want to find out more about what's going on. So I've been working backwards. And last week on the Anything Goes Friday segment, I did an episode on the Saucy Jackie postcard. And somebody asked me, are you going to do one on the Dear Boss letter, the first letter that was mailed in by Jack the Ripper? And the answer to that is yes. That will be coming out this week on the Anything Goes Friday segment. Think of it as working backwards, starting with the later letters and going back in time all the way to the beginning. But after that, that will be mostly putting Jack the Ripper aside for a while, because I have come into the possession of some books about the case of Stephen Avery and the story behind making a murderer. And a big thank you to Jerome, the French wrecking crew, for providing me with those, and he has a lot of observations on his Facebook page about the case of Stephen Avery, so that will be covering the Anything Goes Friday segment for a while. But right now I wanted to talk about a Jack the Ripper communication that I might not get to immediately on the Anything Goes Friday, and that is the Openshaw letter. And in the future I might do a larger episode on this one. But firstly, this was sent on October 29th of 1888. The From Hell letter, which was mailed with half of a victim's kidney, was on October 15th of 1888, so roughly 2 weeks later. Openshaw was the name of the doctor who examined the kidney, although there were many other doctors who looked at it, and many other doctors who gave commentary, such as Sedgwick Saunders, and I quoted him in some of the other episodes. The text of the Openshaw letter reads, "Old boss, you was right. It was the left kidney I was going to hoperate. Again, close to your hospital, just as I was going to draw me knife along of our bloomin' throat. Them cusses of Coopers spoilt the game, but I guess I will be on the job, and will send you another bit of innards. Jack the Ripper." Oh, have you seen the devil with the microscope and the scalpel looking at the kidney with the slide cocked up? So, as you see there, someone seems to have a fair understanding of what's going on, but this letter is filled with misspellings, much as the From Hell letter is filled with misspellings. I mean, someone's talking about a microscope, but they spelled it Mikerscope, and, as I said, there are a lot of similarities between Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer. Both of them wrote letters. Both of them had letters filled with misspellings. The Zodiac mailed in a piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt from the final victim, the taxi driver, but the kidney was mailed in from Catherine Eddowes. Allegedly. I don't think it's 100% determined that that was actually her kidney, and it's mostly 100% determined that that was Paul Stein's bloody shirt. But there are just so many similarities, but I do have to say it again. I think the Zodiac was emulating from Jack the Ripper by mailing in Paul Stein's bloody shirt, because he's not going to cut out his kidney or something like that, but he could cut off a piece of shirt. And I'll just read this thing that is written on Ripper.London. On October 29th of 1888, Thomas Openshaw received a letter through the post to Dr. Openshaw, pathological curator, London Hospital, Whitechapel, and was postmarked London E. OC 2988. Consequently, the letter has been known as the Openshaw letter. Dr. Openshaw examined the kidney that was sent to George Lusk, the chairman of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, along with the From Hell letter earlier that month, and his name was widely connected with the case of Jack the Ripper in the press. He had identified the organ as human and having been removed from the left side. Hence the writer's comment, "You was right, it was the left kidney." The kidney is believed to have been that of Catherine Eddowes. The use of the term Old Boss is a reference to the Dear Boss letter signed by Jack the Ripper. And when you look at the Openshaw letter, I thought that immediately, oh, this just looks silly. It almost looked like a childish prank, like someone's pathetic attempt at trying to do some creepy handwriting, because the From Hell letter that was sent in by the Ripper, if that's a hoax, and I'm not saying it is, that's a decent attempt at looking weird and creepy. But no matter what, I think that the author of the From Hell letter, as well as the Openshaw letter, are trying to disguise their handwriting. It's just not exactly the natural way that somebody would write, and you really see this in the From Hell letter, even with the words From Hell at the top. It looks like someone is just trying to be macabre, and they're trying to be confusing as well, but also look dark and sinister. With the Openshaw letter, it looks a little bit sillier. But did you hear that stuff at the beginning about how it was sent to Dr. Openshaw, pathological curator of the London Hospital? The word hospital is spelled correctly on the envelope, but then in the Openshaw letter, the word hospital is spelled Ospitle, so it's misspelled in the text of the letter, and then it's spelled correctly on the envelope. That also suggests that someone knows how to spell. They are just intentionally putting in misspellings, like perhaps the Zodiac Killer. And also, this person was able to spell pathological correctly. Dr. Openshaw, pathological curator. All of that is done correctly, yet the text is filled with misspellings. That also suggests that this is somebody who's intentionally misspelling words. Now, does that mean that it's a hoax? No, absolutely not. As we said, someone could just be misspelling words on purpose for some type of alternative reason. And the final line from Ripper.London says, "A copy of the letter is on display with other Ripper items in the Royal London Hospital's Museum in Whitechapel." This is one of the Jack the Ripper communications that isn't so widely regarded as being authentic, and I think you can see why. It doesn't have anything that has been sent in from a victim, but it does tie into something that I shared last week about the Saucy Jackie postcard. I think that it's being fairly consistent with the narrative that firstly the Dear Boss letter is mailed, and then after the murders of Liz Stride and Catherine Eddowes, there is the Saucy Jackie postcard that is mailed, and someone says that there is a double event that took place. The first one squealed a bit, and the second one was also interrupted because he wanted to cut off her ears, but then he ended up sending in half a kidney, which was indeed cut out from Catherine Eddowes. But again, all of those points are in line. And what was her name? Andrea Nini was the one who said that the Saucy Jackie postcard is mostly an apology from the Ripper saying, "I'm sorry that I wasn't able to send you in her ears like I promised to do in the Dear Boss letter, but I'm taking credit for these two murders that took place. There's a reason why they were committed. There is an explanation about why two women were murdered in one night. The first one was making too much noise, so he wasn't able to mutilate her, so he slit her throat and exited as quickly as possible. And then Catherine Eddowes was murdered, and perhaps the kidney was preserved in something, so then he could send it in 1888. And when the kidney was mailed in, it was sent in a box that had some type of preservative solution. In most of the sources, they suggest that it was something alcoholic, but one guy wrote into the channel saying it could have actually been formaldehyde, which existed at the time. It was preserved in something, and you'll find all types of descriptive words, like it was something that resembled wine, something that was a spirit, an alcohol of sorts. One website even said that it was ethanol. So the kidney is cut in half and then preserved and then mailed in with the From Hell letter. And then now you have the Openshaw letter that says, talking to the guy who examined the kidney, Thomas Openshaw, "Old boss, you was right. It was the left kidney I was going to operate again, close to your hospital, just as I was going to draw me knife along her bloomin' throat. Them cusses of copper spoiled the game. But I guess I will be on the job soon, and I will send you another bit of innards, Jack the Ripper. Oh, have you seen the devil with the microscope and the scalpel looking at a kidney with a side cocked up?" And here's another point, though. Why some people think that the only letter from Jack the Ripper that's authentic is the From Hell letter is because this is signed Jack the Ripper. The Dear Boss letter is signed Jack the Ripper, and the Saucy Jackie postcard is signed Jack the Ripper or Saucy Jackie, and the From Hell letter is not. It doesn't say Jack the Ripper, so they thought that, alright, maybe it's true. There are hoaxers out there, but there could also be a real serial killer. There could be somebody who's actually committing these crimes, and then someone from the newspapers, perhaps a journalist named Frederick Best, who confessed to this in 1931, was taking credit for the murders by creating the Jack the Ripper persona, and the real serial killer is thinking, hey, that I'm the one doing that. I'm going to prove that I'm the one who's actually committing these crimes. And he doesn't want anything to do with the Jack the Ripper name, because that was a fiction created by the newspaper called The Star, where Frederick Best worked. So he mails in half of a kidney from a victim, as well as the From Hell letter taking credit for the crime. I mean, maybe it's an unsolved case. Even more than 100 years later, it is still an unsolved case. But what do you think about Jack the Ripper? And what do you think about the misspellings in this compared to that of the misspellings of the Zodiac killer? I would love to read your messages down below. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And you can get me on Instagram, BlackBoxNed88. But seriously, if anybody has any recommendations for future episodes and for the Anything Goes Friday segment, or perhaps it could even be included here on the Zodiac Killer News Report, you can put those in any of the social media places. Also, BuyMeACoffee.com, the book Killer on a White Horse, the Teespring page, lots of things in the description box there. That's all for me now. I will see you over on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.